Action.
Howdy ho, friends and foes, and welcome to Dads on Life, your weekly show about parenting from a male perspective. I'm your host, Jay Miles, and with me, as always, are my co-host, Keith Bogan, Doug Hemmerdyke, and Chad Holloway. Today, we'll be talking about, basically, I'm okay. Those moments when the kid goes running by. Within the next couple of seconds, maybe a minute, you hear thud, and then the hopefully usual I'm okay, which sometimes doesn't turn out to be I'm okay, or you'll get the dad scream sometimes as well. So who wants to start us off here?
We all got stories. Come on. I will. My favorite story of all time. No, that's not true. I'm not going to do that in the beginning. I'll wait for that. I do remember when my now 21-year-old was probably 18 months. I disappear for the night. I go to a Mets game in Queens with a bunch of buddies, and we had these great tickets. You know, they gave us the Diamond Club seats, and we got to go to the posh club inside the stadium and all that. But my kid's very young, and so new father and all that. I check in periodically, and at one point during the game, it's like the seventh inning, and we're in the Diamond Club, and we're not even watching the game anymore. And I call home, and a woman's voice answers the phone. And I'm like, who's this? Because clearly it was not the woman I was married to at the time. It turned out it was a 16-year-old neighbor from down the block who said that she was at my house babysitting. I'm sorry, my older son at the time was probably about 4 because my younger son was there. He was like 6 months old. And she's like, yeah, I'm here babysitting Jeremy. And I said, where's his mother? Well, they went to the hospital. What? Apparently, my older son had decided to jump out of his chair and take a header from about 3 feet above the chair right into the ground. Fortunately, a carpeted floor, but he literally hit down with his head. She rushed him to the hospital. She got him the whole battery of tests on him, and he was perfectly fine. But did she call me to tell me any of this? No.
No boy.
To this day, I will say that we get along fine now. We're a divorced couple, but we get along fine. But to this day, this comes up every now and then, and it still burns at me because she didn't call. But it was probably the first example of one of the kids just not understanding the laws of physics, and deciding I'm just going to jump off of wherever I am, and I'm going to land head first, and I should be fine because that's what life is all about. And then parents rushing the kid off to the hospital because, and like I said, turned out he was fine, nothing wrong. But God, I'm sure you guys have experienced that quite a few times yourselves, right, Chad?
Yeah, that's right. We had one time, and we didn't need to go to the hospital now. So I don't think we've had any hospital trips. The only hospital trips we've really had, I think, are for asthma related. But we had one time where he had a bunk bed with his stepsister at the time. And so they were playing, and all of a sudden I just heard a dad, and I heard his stepsister yelling it, and I heard him yelling. And so we ran up there, and they had like little spokes, or I guess spokes on the bed, and he had gotten his arm caught in it, but then he was jumping off of the bed. So he was suspended by his arm on the thing, and she was like trying to hold him up like this so his arm didn't break or get injured in some way. So ran in there and pulled him back up, and so he wasn't getting crushed. And I mean, things were okay, but it was definitely a near miss.
How old was the kid at the time?
At this time, he was probably 6.
So there's some bulk to, when there's a pull on the arm, there's some bulk on it too.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
It's not like when they're 1 or 2 years old and they're just little light feathers or something like that.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, he was old enough to be playing independently, but still, it's kind of a fluke and a freak accident or whatever. But and that was just it was just a bad deal, you know. But
Hmm.
he was okay, so it wasn't that bad of a deal. It was scary.
Right. Right.
Now, Jason's stories like that just happened last year because his kids are really young. So.
Yeah.
Delana, were you talking about Delana, right? With the fracture in ankle?
Uh-huh. Wasn't even a year.
No, no. She just got back to jiu-jitsu. She had just gotten back to jiu-jitsu really in November. Last year, no, wait. I don't remember. I don't know when she did it. When did she do it? She did it late last year, I think. She was doing cartwheels on the mats at jiu-jitsu, and sure enough, landed the wrong way, and thought nothing of it. Got up, said, "I'm okay," and went and taught the younger class, and then started to realize that my leg hurts. And she basically finished helping them teach the class, and then just was like, "I'm not going to do my class." And her professor goes, "What's she made of?" So, it sprained, is what we were told. And then I guess it was about a week later, follow-up appointment. They said, "No, she broke it, she fractured it." So that was an interesting one. There was another one day with her. She goes in her room, she's on her bed, and I don't know what she's doing. And I hear, "Dad!" Okay, so go running in. Where is she? And all I see is a hand come up.
Oh, no.
And I said, "What the hell?" There's the space between her bed and her dresser is, maybe 8 inches, a foot tops. I'll measure it later, but it's not that big. Well, whatever she was doing, she ended up squeezing herself in between her bed and the dresser. Thank God it was her bed, so the bed gave a little bit. But she was down far enough that only part of the bed gave because she was on the spring. She hit her head and her back were on the spring. Well, somehow I kind of just, I actually somehow ended up getting under her. Don't know how I did it. Got my arm under her and then propped her up and pushed her up enough to get her out. That's funny. It was funny after about 10 minutes of, how the hell did she do that? Me thinking, how the hell did I get my arm under there to get her out?
The advantage Jason has is that his kids are really tiny now. Even at 9 years old, Delana's a wisp. She's like a reed in a pond or something like that. They're stick thin, like pinky.
Yeah.
So you can get away with a lot there. That's for sure. My kids were a little more solid growing up. So any pressure in a bad way could, the weight there might have some impact.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Doug's kids, got tangled up and stuff in the basement. I'm sorry.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of my stories, I caused them all. And they mostly ended up in the ER. So the one that didn't, I guess we'll start out with, so it doesn't sound like I'm like some kind of abuser. I felt that way, but the hospital assured me that I am not. So that was good. That was a good feeling that they were like, no, these things happen, But yeah, I was gonna say I have a wraparound porch which has 9-foot windows, and I like to open the windows during the summertime and let the breeze actually blow from the front of the house right through.
Makes
So
sense.
it was getting. What's that?
Makes sense.
Yeah. So it was getting towards dusk, and we had the windows open, and the inside, house, we had all the windows open, and all. And, it was getting later out. And it was kind of like one of those things like Chevy Chase's Christmas Vacation, where it's like, hey, Clark, do you hear that? And I was like, my wife was like saying, do you hear that? And the kids were like, Dad, you don't hear that? I'm like, no, I don't hear anything. Well, as it got really dark, it started fluttering around, and it was a bat in the house.
Oh, it's the great outdoors.
Yeah, we had the bat in the house. So I got my neighbor over, and I got a big broom, and I told him, oh, we're going to flush the bat from the front of the house out the back door. He says, all right. So he's holding the door, and I'm with the broom, and I'm trying to get this bat out, and it's flying all over the place, and its radar's off because it's hitting walls and stuff. I slammed the door, and Jim says, oh, yeah, it went out. I said, you sure it went out, Jim? Yeah. Well, the kids are going to bed and all. So, it's like, I don't know, let's say 9 o'clock at night. Everybody's going to bed. My wife's like, I don't think it's out of the house. I'm like, it's gone. The bat, it's fine. It's gone. So she says, I'm taking the kids in our room. You could sleep wherever you want. I'm not, doing whatever. So they go upstairs. They go in our bedroom, and they're all sleeping there. Had to be like, I don't know, 9:20, 9:30, all the lights are out and all up there. And I just hear this screaming on my kids and all. And my wife. And guess where the bat was? Trapped in a room with my wife and the kids.
Oh,
So everybody was screaming and going crazy. So now the bat is upstairs in my bedroom. And it took quite a while. It stayed most of the night like in the hallway, just banging into walls. It was really sad, before the poor thing like knocked itself out, But it was just fortunate that the wife, we had the kids' doctor's appointment, because she was like sure that we were all going to get rabies from this bat. So the doctor assured her that, bats on this, like in the Northeast, generally don't carry rabies. It's very unlikely at all. And at least that one, I got to live down that we took care of it. And nothing was done where I caused an injury.
I gotta tell you the story that resonates in my brain that I was going to say earlier. I'll say it now. True parenting, and talk about questionable practices. I live in a townhouse community where a lot of every 4-bedroom house like this one is identical. So my in-laws at the time live in the next quadrant over, and it's literally a 5-minute walk from my front doorstep, in an identical house to the one that I'm in. We're over there for a holiday event one December, and I'm going to guess Jeremy was probably 6, Justin was probably about 9, something like that. It's myself and my wife and her parents and a couple of neighbors, and everybody has kids, and all the kids are in the basement. So there's probably like 6 or 7 kids in the basement, maybe a little bit more, I forget. And the adults are in the living room just relaxing, having a bottle of wine. It's after all the festivities. And we hear Jeremy coming up the stairs crying.
uh-oh.
He emerges from the basement. And I still remember my ex-wife's, she said very broad, we're both looking the other way, and we're like, unless there's blood, I don't want to hear about it.
Yes.
And it's that moment behind us where we heard, but, from a 6-year-old. We turned around and he's got blood streaming down his forehead like this. The funny part of the story was how we reacted to it. Now, I didn't say anything, but my ex looked at him and said, back up, you're on the white carpet. Don't get on the carpet.
Aye.
Turned out that one of the other kids had been spinning what I think was a metal rake or something like that in the basement, some kind of metallic object with sharp edges, and just twirling it. Another 6-year-old or 7-year-old, something like that. And he clipped, he just basically took a little bit of his forehead. It was, I guess, he could have hit his eye, but when you touch a forehead, it bleeds very easily. But here we are, the great parents that we were already on child number 2. And the first thought was not to get blood on the carpet. We weren't really concerned about the kid. This is called parenting. This is how we parented. I don't know.
I
Yeah.
And we spent 3 Mother's Days in hospitals from ERs from our boys. You know, the one was the worst one, which was very interesting and makes you wonder about Colin sometimes. Is that we bought these giant flower pots, and they were huge, and we had them out on the patio for my wife when she woke up, and I was in the kitchen making breakfast and all, and we're admiring the flower pots for the window. You know, they got plants in them, and well, they had all the stuff to put the plants in them and all. And there's Brendan. He's got to be like 7 or 8, and he's picking up this flower pot. I'm like, Brendan, put the flower pot down. You're gonna break it. You're gonna drop it. And he drops it and it falls on top of it. Don't you know that flower pot went right through his leg, like his upper thigh?
Ooh.
So I ran out there, I scooped him up, I brought him in, I put him on the counter, I ran to the closet, Heather like grabbed him and stuff, and Colin, and I grabbed one of my ties out of the closet and I tied off his leg, threw him in the car, and we drove him right to the ER. And that was like one of those things where I drove right up in front of the ER and I run him inside. I put him on the first gurney that I see like right inside the door, and I run back outside, and the police are there telling me, you can't park here. I'm like, I can't park here. Seriously?
I would have thought the first thing they asked you for was your copay, and then that you were parked in the wrong place.
yeah, right.
So I finally moved the car. My wife was inside with Colin, and it was just lucky that one of the doctors on was one of our friends from that used to work with me like years ago. So she waved us right in, and as they were like stitching him up, and all his fatty tissues like hanging out and all, Colin wouldn't leave his side. And he just sat there and watched him and they were like, we suggest you take out the younger child. And we're like and Colin was just so upset and he wouldn't leave Brendan. So they finally had to just stitch him up with Colin right there. Colin watched the whole procedure. So I don't know what that says about Colin, but.
and now he's going to be a doctor. That's good.
That's what I was just going to say.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, really.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Chad, how much blood has there been in your kids' history?
How much blood? Actually, not much.
What
Not-
kind of
not too
parent
much.
are you? What kind of dad are you? You no blood? What are you talking about?
Nope. Not that I can think of. I mean, that some of the things I can think of are just like me worrying about him more than anything else. I remember one time we sent him to stay away camp, and so he was gone for a week. I'm not sure how old he was at the time, but he was probably maybe 12, 13, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was an outdoor camp, and they had their cabins. Well, it just had like one wall, and then it had kind of bunks, just wooden bunks. So they had to take their sleeping bags, but it was one wall was like open, right? It had a roof. It's more like a pavilion than anything else, but it was up in the woods. And so he was in there with some buddies, but we packed him all of his stuff and went toward the camp with him before, when we dropped him off and stuff. But they had this giant lake that people swam in. They go, oh, but we've got lifeguards. These lifeguards are like probably 14, 15 years old. So that didn't make me feel real good. And my son's a good swimmer, but at the same time, just kind of worried about it. But, he was there for a week and he didn't really call home too much. I think his mom at the time was much more into calling him and making sure he was okay and stuff. And I just, would call every couple of days and check on him. But, he was fine. He came home and nothing happened, thank God. And but they did some nature walks and, for a bunch of young kids kind of out on their own in the woods. I was a little nervous, but everything turned out good, except, we had to throw his clothes away because they were so dirty. Washing.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing with the calling from home. We don't allow the kids to call from home when we go with scout camping, especially if we're going to be out there for a week. We don't allow them to call home because that's when they all break down, is at night when they want to call home. And I remember my first trip out, one of the kids says, oh, I have to call my mom, this and that and all. I'm like, all right, here you go. Here's my phone. I got your mom right here on speed dial, And then the one lady came up to me who was like a stern Boy Scout when I was in Cub Scout leader. And she's like, what is that kid doing down there, Tykeem? I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's calling his mom. And she said, you can't allow him to call home. And I said, why? She goes, he's down there crying his eyes out. And I was like, what? And she's like, we don't let anybody call home because this is exactly what happens. And she like went down there and grabbed the phone right out of his hands and says, you know, Sharif, Takeem is fine. There's nothing wrong with him. He's not injured. He's going to say goodnight to you and you're going to have a good night. And I was like, oh my God.
You know, and now that you mention, I think they did have some issue about, or some rule about, you couldn't call like the first or second night, something like that. But he wasn't interested in it. He wasn't homesick at all. He's a pretty resilient, independent kid for the most part.
Dad, that's called get the hint.
Yeah, exactly. It's much easier for him than it is for me.
I know Jason's kids. I mean, if they went away for 3 weeks, they'd be like, who's dad? You know, what the heck, you know?
Pretty much. Well, Sadie has the distinction of probably of being probably the first kid in America first 5-year-old in America to get a black eye from a UFC fighter.
Nice.
Oh, sweet. That's a badge of honor, though, don't you think?
Yeah, pictures.
The head of this, the guy who owns the school is Horace Gracie. He's the whole family. Horace Gracie was the one that started in UFC 1. He's been around. The family's been around since the very beginning. Horace fought a couple times in UFC. He's also the largest member of the family at 6'4" and 250 pounds.
He's beating up on little girls.
Well, they were doing something in jiu-jitsu, and his arm came back, and he got her right in the eye with the elbow.
Nice.
And she barely cried, barely. He was mortified.
Get pictures.
I wish I had one. I think there is one. At least probably has one. But Sadie's had a few black eyes where she just, she's been. There's been times where she's just woken up and you go, where the hell did she get that? And you don't know. She does a lot. She'll fall, get up, and just keep moving, and then a couple days later you go, where the hell did you get that, Bruce?
Their kids are probably more active than I think any of our kids were in terms of potential injuries and all that sort of thing.
Well, not just potential injuries, but I mean, between jiu-jitsu and camp, yeah, they definitely do their share of running around and that. Fortunately for them, Grandma is the nurse at camp, so that's one thing that is a bonus. And their uncle is a counselor at the camp too, so if anything happens there, it usually is quickly taken care of. So, which hasn't happened, really, too bad. But yeah, I mean, jiu-jitsu is they've definitely have had their share of slips and falls at jiu-jitsu. It happens in any contact sport. But yeah, Sadie getting elbowed by Willis was an interesting one. Yeah, he was really absolutely mortified by it, but it was pretty
Does Sadie remember it happening?
If I ask her, she probably would. She doesn't talk about it, but she probably remembers it. Yeah, I mean, but I'm going to actually pull one out on me. This is both pretty much my fault more than anybody's. I, in second grade, probably in the spring, so this is about 30, almost 35 years ago.
When I was in
We-
college.
we were playing baseball outside, and my sister's boyfriend at the time, I guess, threw the ball a little too high. We were playing baseball, and this was the aluminum bat days. My sister swung the bat overhand and thinking she was going to hit the ball.
This
She
sounds
missed the ball and got me right in the eye. And
that
it looked,
explains a lot.
it looked like I was in a fight with Mike Tyson. So,
It also happens frequently with you. But anyway.
she knows. But yeah, actually, it's a little bit surprising that there's been a few incidents, and another one. It's not even there was one night. It had to be. This was a couple of weeks ago. I think it was during quarantine, maybe a little bit before. But one night I just hear dud, 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 dud. What the freak? What the fuck is that? I'm like, God damn it, what the hell's going on? And I walk in, and it is definitely during quarantine. And I walk in, and there's Sadie doing jumping jacks. Sadie, what the hell are you doing? And I look at the clock and realize it's 10:30 at night. Sadie, what are you doing? I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, these kids got to get back to jiu-jitsu, like now.
No.
Oh, boy. I'm sure we've all got tons. I think we may end up going on with this a little bit more next week. We'll see. I don't know. But we probably could go on for hours about this, But you're going to go ahead, Keith. You were going to say something.
I was good. There's one more story I could tell that my ex would tell you absolutely defines my parenthood skills. I always envisioned that Justin would be center fielder for the New York Yankees. He was the big time baseball player in the family. Jeremy was never as much interested, although he played, but he wasn't as interested. By the time Justin was about 9, I thought he was really good. He had real talent. He could catch stuff. I used to be able to throw a baseball really hard. And I think Justin was 9 or 10, he got to a point where he could catch anything I could throw. And I remember it was a July 4th. We went to the pool that day, the 4 of us. And Justin and I would never go in the pool. We would just sit there and throw a baseball off to the side. And I'm just hurling. I'm just winging it at him. And he's catching everything I'm throwing. Almost.
Uh-oh.
At one point, he puts the glove up like this. It ticks off the top of his glove, takes him right here, knocks a tooth out, just blasts it right out of his face. Oh, God. And, of course, there's tons of people all around. And everybody's panicking, and there's blood and shit. And I'm holding him like, okay, let's get him to the dentist. I'm trying to be cool and like, all right, and somebody scoops up the tooth and all that. Because, they hear that you can actually put a tooth back in if you do it in the right way. We take him to the dentist. The dentist laughs and says, it's a baby tooth. What are you wasting my time for? She cleans him up, calms him down. And as soon as we're back at the pool, I kid you not, within about 45 minutes. What's the first thing that Justin does? He grabs his glove and says, let's go throw, Dad. Let's go.
Yep.
Right back out there.
Yep.
And she was fucking pissed at me. She was like, you did this. It's your fault. How could you throw again? And Justin's like, time to throw. This is great. It's how I raised him. You get hurt, you get right back up.
Yep.
Didn't face the ball.
That's most. If Delana would have been, as soon as she could, Delana was back out on the mat. We weren't going to. What do you say? No. You get up and keep going.
The mom here was not exactly thrilled with me at that time. Let me just undercoat it that way.
That's funny. Yeah, one time recently, and he just got sick. He wasn't He wasn't hurt or anything, but it still was something I had helped cause. This was probably in the last 3 years. I took him to the gym with me on one Sunday, and I used to work out, do legs, and with some guys that lifted a lot of heavy weights, and a couple of them are professionals now, pro bodybuilders. But it was just like grueling sessions. So he's jumping in with us one day to train. So he's training. All of a sudden, he just like turns pale and has to run over to the garbage can and just hurls in the garbage can because he wasn't used to working that hard. I mean, but these guys, like literally after that, like I would go home and I wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
Because my legs would be so sore and everything, but it wore him out. But then still he did that, and I was so proud of him because, like you were saying, Keith, you get back into it. And one of the guys that I train with is a nurse, and he was there that day, and he's like looking at him. He's like, "Are you okay?" And he says, "You're looking a little pale." He says, "Probably low on electrolytes now." He says, "So," he goes, "Why don't you just do like one more set?" So he still did a set with 100 reps after he had puked. So,
Nice.
which was good, but that's just get it out and get back in there. It's not waste time. But third thing I was going to say too is two more things is internationally. I travel quite a bit internationally, and the thing when I've taken him with me and that I've tried to get across to him, we're talking about injuries and stuff as he ages. I'm like, well, whenever you're in a foreign country, I said, it's certainly, don't be stupid in the United States, but when you're in a foreign country, be especially conservative because we don't know where the hospitals are. We may not speak the language, so be very careful. I don't want you getting hurt somewhere and then having to go to a hospital where you don't speak the language or where you're not where you're there alone or just with some friends or even with me. I said, so just be very careful with that. And then the other thing I think that Keith and I have in common is in the next couple of weeks, our kids are headed back to school. So we've got this COVID thing going on. And I know you guys with the younger kids have to deal with possibly returning to school, but like even caring for yourself and taking care of themselves. And, I'm pretty confident my son's going to take this very seriously when he goes back to Tempe for college. But, that's a big concern of mine too, is like, take care of yourself. Don't be subjected to any type of pressure from your friends to not wear your mask if they say wear your mask and those kinds of things. So that was the other thing related kind of to health and near misses is got that coming up. And it's, it's a little nerve wracking to me. And, certainly something could happen, but I'm hoping that he does everything he can in his power to prevent that.
Ted, along those lines as my last comment for the show, we have a sort of a topic in this house, kids are 18 and above, as yours is going back to Tempe. And if they're going someplace where they could be exposed to COVID, and if something very bad were to happen, who would make the medical decisions? And we have a discussion here that's not going very well about you need to sign a power of attorney for medical decisions in case something happens to you. And both of my kids have been rather resistant to that. Something you might want to consider talking about with your son as well.
Absolutely.
But in normal times, I probably wouldn't do that. What are they going to break their arm or get alcohol poisoning or something like that at a party or something like that? Not that that's a minor issue, but still. But COVID can really take you out to the point where you can't do anything.
Yep.
Then somebody really needs to be making a decision. And right now, I can't do it because they're legal adults. So that's a challenge too.
Well, and a lot of times I go with next of kin. I used to work in a hospital, and a lot of times I go with next of kin. So it'd be your wife and you. So that would be an issue, as long as you guys agreed.
She and I are in total lockstep about, even though we're divorced, we're in total lockstep about how to take care of them from a medical standpoint. So I'm not worried about differing in that regard.
Okay.
But neither one of us can make that decision. I don't know if the hospital would allow us because they're adults.
Right.
Yeah, but I think they would look to you, and the way they always told us is like, look for who's going to sue you, because we had a time when we came in where a patient came in who was a Jehovah's Witness, and he had been in a real bad car accident. He had a fiance and his mother were there, and he needed a blood transfusion, but they don't take blood transfusion as Jehovah's Witnesses. His fiance says, do it. His mother says, no.
Right.
So they went with his mother, and this was probably a 28-year-old man. So, but they would defer. I mean, there's a pecking order, and it's like if he was married, it'd be the wife, but since he wasn't, it was his parents, and
And
that's
I would
very
be perfectly happy if he signed a power of attorney and made his girlfriend that person. I don't care as long as someone is.
yep. And that's the best thing is that document and making sure that document's available to somebody.
Exactly. Exactly. Anyway, Jay, you want to wrap it up?
Clearly, I think every parent goes through something with their kid of that moment of, oh shit, they hurt themselves, and then it ends up being not so bad, usually, hopefully. And you look back at it, and for what seemed like the worst moment, they sometimes end up being some of the better ones and some of the more comical moments at times. This is something I'm sure we'll come back to down the road. What next week brings, we will see, as we've been playing it along with the developments that have gone on in our lives because of the current situation we're in. As we go week to week, right now we just found out here that the Rutgers football team has suspended any activities for the time being due to 10 players, it was as of yesterday, I don't know what it is now, testing positive for COVID. The team has been shut down pretty much. They've all been put into quarantine. We're going to play this thing by ear and keep playing it by ear. That's all we can do. For all of us here at Dad's on Life, we'll see you on the other side. Stay safe.
See you guys.
See you.
Weekend.
Guys.